The morning sun bounced off the steel like it was proud to exist. The olive green paint, newly sealed, looked almost wet. I stood there with a cup of coffee, admiring my 1943 M4 Sherman tank like it was a classic muscle car. Except, 30 tons heavier. The quiet suburban neighborhood around it formed an amusing contrast, like someone accidentally printed a war machine into a children's coloring book. I heard the screen door slam. Of course, that sound had become part of the ecosystem since she moved in, like a woodpecker hammering a tree out of spite. "Excuse me!" Her voice snapped across the yard, sharp enough to cut metal. Karen marched over, sunglasses on though it was barely 8 a.m. She pointed at the tank like it was actively attacking her. "What is that thing doing here?" I sipped my coffee, unfazed. "Good morning to you too." She ignored it. "You can't park that weapon on a residential property. This violates at least 8 HOA regulations." "It's demilitarized," I said. "Doesn't even have a working cannon. Technically, it's a historical vehicle." She blinked, as if she hadn't even considered the possibility that someone might know more about the thing they own than she does. "I'm calling the HOA," she declared, turning on her heel like she expected dramatic applause. I took another sip of coffee. "Tell them I said hi." She stopped mid-step. "They're not going to find that funny." I shrugged. "Then I guess we're all in for an interesting week." She stormed away without another word, but the look she gave me said this wasn't over. It was beginning. By Tuesday evening, you'd think I'd parked a missile launcher in the cul-de-sac. Every time I took out the trash, walked the dog, or even checked the mailbox, someone was snapping a photo of the tank, sometimes cautiously, sometimes with the same disgust you'd reserve for roadkill. Word spread fast, and Karen fed it like a wildfire. That night, I got an email with a very official-looking subject line. "Mandatory HOA meeting, vehicle violation." I sat in my living room, rereading the message while my dog snored next to me. The email tone was stiff, urgent, dramatic, like I'd committed a federal crime by owning expensive lawn decor. So I went. The meeting room was the community clubhouse, a glorified shed with folding chairs. Karen sat front row, arms crossed and lips pursed so tightly she could probably turn coal into diamonds. The HOA president, Greg, cleared his throat like he was about to announce an invasion. "Thank you all for coming. We need to address a concerning situation regarding, a military tank." Everyone looked at me, some curious, some horrified. One guy looked impressed. "It's causing alarm among residents," Greg continued. "We've received multiple complaints." Karen raised her hand so fast I swear her shoulder popped. "It's a threat to the community. It's a symbol of violence." I raised my hand calmly. "It's a historical restoration. Legally registered. It's basically a vintage vehicle." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone whispered to their spouse. "So it's like a collector's car?" Karen cut in. "It's a weapon of war sitting next to my gardenias." I leaned forward. "Without a functioning cannon. The most it can attack is weeds." Light laughter broke through the tension, and Karen flushed red. Greg sighed. "We need time to review the bylaws. Until then, no action will be taken." Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't let him win!" "I'm not trying to win," I said. "Just trying to park." She stood slowly, shaking with fury. "I'll handle this myself." Those words didn't sound like a threat, more like a promise. Outside, the night air felt heavy. Something had been set in motion, and whatever she planned next wouldn't be subtle. The next morning, something felt off. My dog kept pacing near the door, whining. The air felt too still. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, expecting to see the usual suburban calm. Instead, I saw Karen standing on her lawn, holding her phone horizontally, recording the tank. She zoomed in, zoomed out, angled shots like she was filming a true crime episode. I lifted a hand in a casual wave. She gave me a tight-lipped smile that felt more like a threat than courtesy. Then she marched inside, and that's when I saw it. Scratches, deep, angry gouges carved into the paint along the side of the tank, fresh enough to glisten in the morning dew. I placed my hand over one of the marks, feeling the uneven scrape. That paint job had taken months. The restoration wasn't just money. It was time, research, history. Someone didn't accidentally brush up against a 30-ton vehicle. My stomach tightened. I knew. And yet, I still asked the question out loud. Who would be stupid enough? Then I noticed the small puddle beneath the treads. A harsh chemical smell punched my nose. Paint stripper. Cheap hardware store stuff, sloppily used. My hands clenched before I even realized it. Anger didn't come like a roar. It came cold, like ice crawling up my spine. I heard a door creak. Karen reappeared with a smug tone. Oh no, looks like someone vandalized your little toy. I turned to her, keeping my voice controlled. Karen, did you do this? Accusations are very serious, she replied, with that fake innocence bad actors use in soap operas. But maybe this is a sign. Maybe the neighborhood just doesn't want it here. You damaged private property. She smiled. Prove it. I stared at her. You realize this is a military historical artifact, right? You didn't just scratch a car. You damaged government property. Her eyes flickered. Just a fraction, but I saw it. A crack in her confidence. Suddenly, she didn't look smug. She looked scared, but trying to bury it. Then she whispered, "No one will care." I smiled, slowly. "Wanna bet?" Her face stiffened like stone. This wasn't neighborhood drama anymore. This was about to go federal. I spent the next 2 hours documenting everything. Photos, measurements, the exact chemical residue left behind. I wasn't guessing. I was building a case. Restoration isn't just a hobby. It's paperwork, appraisals, and provenance. And this tank? It was technically on loan to me from a military museum. I was its caretaker. Any damage to it wasn't just vandalism. It fell under federal protection. So I made one phone call. Not to a lawyer. Not to the local police. I called the museum's preservation office. A calm voice answered, older and oddly friendly. Preservation Department, Mike speaking. I explained what happened. Fact by fact, no drama. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, he exhaled sharply. That tank is U.S. government property. We'll have to notify the military police. Expect contact within 48 hours. Most people panic hearing the words military police, but I didn't. Karen would. Thank you, I said. I'm sending over the photos now. After hanging up, I walked outside. Karen was pruning her gardenias viciously, shredding them more than trimming. She was humming, too loudly, like someone trying to pretend they weren't worried. I stood near the tank, taking a video this time, narrating the damage, deliberately loud enough for her to hear. Her humming got even louder, then suddenly stopped. She turned, forced a smile, and said, "You know, fixing that damage could cost more than the tank's worth." "Oh, don't worry," I replied. "Someone else will be paying for it." She laughed lightly. "Sure, maybe your insurance?" "No," I said. "Yours." The color drained from her face so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. She quickly gathered her gardening tools and headed inside without another word. No screaming, no threats, no smug comments. She knew something was coming, and for the first time, she didn't know how to spin it. That night was quiet. Too quiet. No lights flipping on across the street. No ring cameras pointed at the tank. Just a heavy silence. It felt like the neighborhood was holding its breath. And I had a feeling they wouldn't have to hold it long. Something big was on its way. I was asleep when it started. The unmistakable thump of boots on the driveway. My heart jumped awake before my eyes did. I rolled over and peeked through the blinds. 3 uniformed figures stood at the edge of the tank, flashlights sweeping across its olive green hull. Military police. No sirens, no drama, just presence. And Karen, she was standing frozen on her porch, mouth slightly open, like she'd seen a ghost. A very angry, heavily armed ghost. I opened the door cautiously. "Evening, gentlemen. Here to inspect the damage?" My voice was calm, but my hands clenched the coffee mug like a weapon. "Private citizen, we need to document this vehicle," one officer said, voice clipped but professional. "It's federal property. Vandalism has been reported." I nodded and led them to the tank, pointing out the gouges and the chemical residue. The MP officer crouched beside one of the scratches, swabbing carefully. Every movement was methodical, meticulous, like they were handling a bomb, not a museum piece. And then I felt it. A cold, almost tangible tension across the street. Karen hadn't moved. She didn't wave. She didn't protest. She just watched. One officer looked up and squinted across the street. "Is that the homeowner?" Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. I was just, walking," she stammered. The officer's gaze hardened. "Ma'am, we need to speak with anyone involved in the vandalism." Karen froze. Her hands trembled slightly, gripping the porch railing. Her eyes darted between me, the tank, and the officers, like a trapped animal. The weight of her actions, the scratches, the chemicals, the reports, finally hit her. I felt a pang of satisfaction I hadn't expected. Not joy, exactly, but validation. Years of painstaking restoration almost obliterated by one entitled neighbor. And now the law was on my side. Karen swallowed hard. I don't know anything, she whispered. Her voice cracked slightly, the rehearsed confidence evaporating. The officer raised an eyebrow. We'll see. For now, step inside. She hesitated, glancing at the tank like it had become a monster in her yard. Then slowly, like someone hypnotized, she moved back toward her house. I leaned on the tank's hull, watching her retreat. She was still alive, still fuming. But she was powerless now. For the first time, she wasn't the one controlling the narrative. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to just back down, not quietly, not ever. And as I stood there under the dim porch light, I realized the next move was hers. The morning after the MPs visited, the neighborhood felt different. Like everyone knew something had shifted. My driveway, my tank. It had become a focal point of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Karen wasn't absent, but she had clearly switched tactics. Gone was the direct confrontation. Now came the subtle, corrosive war. I noticed it first at breakfast. A small envelope slipped under my gate. Inside, a typed note. We all have rules. Some just don't follow them. Watch yourself. No signature. Just menacing enough to make my skin crawl. But vague enough to let her claim innocence. I recognized the handwriting anyway. Her cursive, rigid and precise, always felt like someone was trying to control the alphabet itself. Then came the garden sabotage. Overnight, someone had strewn white stones around my flower beds in jagged, deliberate patterns. They weren't dangerous, but the message was clear. I'm watching. I can interfere. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the tank. My treads needed lubrication, the turret needed polishing, and repainting wasn't optional. Restoration was ritual for me, a kind of meditation. Yet every time I knelt near the hull, I felt eyes on me. And sure enough, from the corner of my street-facing window, Karen's silhouette appeared. Hands on her hips, phone out, filming. I sighed, rubbing grease from my hands. Really? I muttered to myself. She didn't respond verbally. She didn't need to. Her entire posture screamed challenge. By mid-afternoon, the HOA sent another email. Neighbors have expressed concern regarding ongoing tensions related to property displays. I read it aloud to my dog. Tensions. That's one word for Karen is losing her mind. Her war wasn't violent yet, not physically, but it was psychological. Small acts, strategic annoyances, and constant observation. It was exhausting just watching her operate. And then I noticed the new addition, a small mirror propped against her porch railing, angled toward the tank. She was literally surveilling me, day and night. I stared at it for a long moment, then laughed, a dry, incredulous laugh. I had been ready for angry HOA letters, maybe a complaint to the city, even threats. But this? Passive-aggressive espionage? That was new. It was clear. She was planning something bigger. Something that would escalate beyond notes, stones, and mirrors. And I had a sinking feeling it wasn't going to end well for my tank. It happened on a Thursday night. No warnings, no notes. No passive-aggressive gardening. Just silence. Karen's house was dark, but not in a cozy, lights-off-to-sleep way. It felt vacant, hollow. Even her porch mirror was gone. The neighborhood felt deflated, as if the air itself had decided to take the night off. My dog paced restlessly, ears twitching at a sound I couldn't hear. I finally stepped outside with a flashlight, scanning the yard, the tank, the faint glow of streetlights. Nothing looked disturbed at first glance. The hatch was closed. The hull gleamed faintly in the moonlight. But something felt wrong. Too still, too staged, like the calm before a storm. I ran my hand across the side of the tank, cold metal, smooth surface freshly waxed from earlier, and then my fingers snagged on something small. A scratch? No, a smear, sticky, slick. Oil dripped from the gear housing. My stomach dropped. I knelt down, shining my flashlight beneath the hull. And there it was, a puddle of thick hydraulic fluid. Not a leak, a deliberate pull valve release. Someone had drained the tank's internal systems. 30 gallons siphoned onto my driveway. A repair that would cost thousands, and worse, would risk the tank's internal components if left untreated. I stood slowly, pulse pounding. My voice cracked out loud, though no one was there to hear it. She actually did it. A whisper of motion made me spin around, beam cutting across the street. A shadow pulled back behind a curtain in Karen's window. She wasn't gone. She was hiding, watching, waiting for me to find the damage. And that's when I saw the real problem. A heavy-duty cart behind her bushes. the kind used to move large barrels, the faint glint of a funnel, rubber gloves discarded on the curb. She hadn't just sabotaged the tank. She had prepared for it. This wasn't impulsive vandalism anymore. This was premeditated destruction of government property. I stared at her dark window, shaking with something that wasn't anger exactly. Something sharper, colder. "Okay," I whispered. "You want war? You got it." Before the sun came up, I was already holding the phone, dialing a number I never thought I'd need again. When they answered, I said the only 3 words required. She tampered again. By the time the military police arrived again, the sun was just starting to spill golden light across the cul-de-sac. I hadn't slept. Not really. My nerves were taut. My coffee long gone cold. The tank sat there like a giant green sentinel, glinting, scarred, and slightly leaking hydraulic fluid. Karen came outside immediately when she saw them pull up. Her face, usually so carefully composed, was pale. She clutched her phone like a shield, lips pressed tight. There was no argument, no theatrics. For the first time, she froze completely, like a statue mid-motion, caught in a snapshot she couldn't escape. One of the MPs stepped forward. Tall, professional, calm. "Ma'am, step away from the property." Karen's eyes darted between the tank, me, and the officers. I was just inspecting my plants." Her voice quivered. The rehearsed indignation of weeks melted into something raw. Panic. Real, human panic. The officer ignored her and began inspecting the hydraulic fluid, the scratches, the residue. I documented everything quietly, my camera capturing both evidence and her frozen terror. I couldn't suppress the faint smirk forming in my chest. Karma finally showing its face. Karen tried to speak again. This is ridiculous. You can't." The second officer cut her off. "Step back." Her hands shook as she pressed them to her mouth, eyes wide. For weeks, she had tried to control the narrative, weaponize HOA complaints, scare neighbors, and undermine me, and now she couldn't do a single thing. The lead MP addressed me. "Do you have proof of the tampering?" I handed over my photos, my notes, my videos, everything meticulously logged. "Here. And here's a video from last night showing the spill." She was, actively preparing to sabotage it. Karen's jaw dropped. For the first time, words failed her. She looked like a cornered animal, but instead of lashing out, she simply stared. The officers exchanged glances, jotting notes, taking swabs. I could feel the tension across the street. She wanted a fight, but she had no weapons left. No leverage, no narrative, only guilt and fear. Finally, the lead MP said, "We'll handle this from here. She will be questioned." Karen turned, her legs rigid, and retreated into her house without a word. The officers lingered, taking final measurements, then left, leaving the tank intact for the first time in weeks. I stepped closer, brushing the scratches lightly with my hand. The smell of hydraulic fluid lingered, but for the first time the tension in my shoulders loosened slightly. I realized something important. The real war wasn't about the tank anymore. It was about patience, evidence, and letting the law and time do the work. But even as I exhaled, a shiver ran down my spine. Karen wasn't gone. She was still out there, still watching, still calculating, and I knew. Chapter 9 was coming. The following week was surreal. Karen barely left her house, and when she did, she avoided eye contact like a guilty kid caught red-handed. The HOA finally went silent, and for once, my neighborhood felt normal. Or at least as normal as having a fully restored 1940s war tank parked in a cul-de-sac could feel. The military police called me on Thursday. Calm, methodical voices on the other end, confirming that Karen would be officially cited for tampering with government property. There would be fines, mandatory community service, and, most importantly, a permanent record of her interference. I let myself smile, quietly, privately. Justice didn't always have fireworks, but this was close enough. I went outside that evening, brushing my hands along the tank's hull. The scratches were still there, a reminder of the chaos Karen had wrought, but now they felt almost like battle scars, proof that it had survived the storm. The hydraulic fluid had been replaced, lubricated, polished, and finally, the tank hummed with the quiet dignity it deserved. Neighbors waved politely now, curiosity replaced by cautious respect. One of them leaned over the fence. "That thing survived her?" I chuckled dryly. Yeah, and she won't be messing with it again. Even Karen's house seemed quieter, the occasional shadow at the window replaced by stillness. She hadn't apologized, not in words, but her retreat felt like a concession. For once, her power over the street, over me, had vanished. That night, I climbed into the tank's driver hatch, feeling the weight of history beneath me. I could almost imagine the crews from the 1940s, imagining the roar of engines, the dust of battlefields. And yet here I was, in suburbia, surrounded by neatly trimmed lawns and quiet streetlights. The world completely unchanged by the chaos, yet deeply altered in my corner of it. I thought about Karen one last time. She had tried to control, intimidate, and destroy something precious. But evidence, patience, and a little law enforcement had done what yelling, petitions, and passive aggression never could. As I stepped out, wiping the last streaks of oil from my hands, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. The tank still stood, restored, proud, and untouchable, just like I intended. And for once, I allowed myself to imagine peace, even if just for a moment, knowing Karen had learned a lesson she'd never forget. Victory wasn't about revenge, it was about preservation. And today, my tank, my property, and my sanity had survived. If you thought this was wild, wait until you hear what happens next in my neighborhood. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it, and drop a comment below. What would you do if your neighbor tried to destroy your tank? Hit that like button if you love true HOA drama.